Welcome to the Catholic Sphere. Each week we have a different host and a different focus as we tackle topics important to Catholics around the globe. I'm your host this week, Debbie Cowden. In today's episode, we'll be addressing whether or not we can change hearts and minds on abortion. My panelists today are very special to the EWTN family and have been in the trenches of the pro-life movement. We have Catherine Hadro, founding host of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly and current host of EWTN News in Depth. Kristen Hawkins, the president of Students for Life and Students for Life Action, and Patricia Sandoval, international speaker and host of Informe Pro Vida on EWTN Espanol. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me. Catherine, we'll start with you. As the founding host of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, can you tell us, why was it so important for EWTN to have a show specifically dedicated to pro-life news and issues?
Well, thank you for having me, Debbie, and what a lineup. I'm so grateful to be here. I mean, EWTN Pro-Life Weekly is such a critical part of EWTN news programming because it reflects the priority of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has been a fearless defender on the life issue for decades, especially when other denominations have squirmed on the issue of life and contraception. The church stands strong. And as the U.S. bishops have put it, putting an end to an abortion is the preeminent priority for the U.S. bishops. And so it makes sense that that is reflected in our programming. It makes sense that EWTN, which is faithful to the magisterium, created a show that reflects that priority for us as Catholics and the unique challenges that we have when it comes to the pro-life movement. I would say also, Debbie, having a show that is every single week. I mean, obviously, EWTN, we go big when it comes to covering the March for Life in January, right? But there are issues when it pertains to the pro-life issue every single week throughout the year. And so it's important to have a show that we can all together in the movement come together, discuss the latest, see what the latest news is. And also it gives us a chance to fully articulate the Catholic Church's teachings on life. Abortion is critical to that teaching, but the culture of life is rich, when it comes to strengthening the family, when it comes to the topic of capital punishment, and really just upholding the dignity of every human person.
And we're so grateful for the time and the sweat and the tears that you have poured into Pro-Life Weekly over the years, and grateful for your continued presence on EWTN as well. And you may recognize Kristen Hawkins, who has also been on Pro-Life Weekly. Kristen, when it comes to changing hearts and minds on abortion, you are one of the first people I think of and one of the strongest witnesses. And as the president of Students for Life, you spearhead the effort to spread the pro-life message on college campuses, and you go head-to-head with pro-abortion students in all 50 states. So why did you decide to zero in on college campuses?
Well, I don't think it's, most people I think understand that the abortion industry is very clear about who they're targeting, and that is our young people. And so when you think about where can we make the biggest impact in the pro-life movement as we're changing culture, as we also engage in, in the political or policy, where do we make the biggest impact? And I firmly believe, and the reason we launched Students for Life 18 years ago was to go right where the abortion industry is targeting young people who they're targeting them daily for business. They're starting as early in some states as an elementary school, selling their predatory create a customer cycle. But when they're not able to get them in the doors and make a profit from them, they're also working on changing their hearts on this issue and, hiding the truth of what abortion really is. And when we think about the future of our pro-life movement, which I think all of us here and many of us in the pro-life movement agree is going to be a long battle, these young people who we have the opportunity to interact with, engage, build up, and train, they will be the ones that will see an end to abortion when we make abortion an unthinkable act in our nation. And so these are the young people that we need to invest in, not only to change minds and serve them right there on campus when they face an unplanned crisis pregnancy, but also building up this generation of leaders who will go on to start their own pregnancy centers, maternity homes, invent new organizations to solve problems we haven't even thought of yet. It's going to be this generation.
Exactly. This is going to be the generation that not just makes abortion illegal, but unthinkable, as you say. And
Right.
Patricia, as somebody who's actually worked in an abortion facility and as a post abortive woman, you have a unique perspective. So, for those who aren't familiar with your story, can you share with us how you got to where you are now? Just not just advocating for life as opposed to abortion, but also in your outreach to fellow post abortive women.
Well, after being traumatized by having 3 abortions, suffering post-abortion syndrome, and then a greater trauma, being part of the abortion industry, was deceived as a worker as well, and literally having to look for baby body parts behind the doors of Planned Parenthood, I went to a Rachel's Vineyard retreat for healing. And after that retreat, I mean, I just felt so joyful because God has forgiven me so much. And the coordinator of Rachel's Vineyard said, Patricia, I need you to do me a big favor. I've been trying to set up a Rachel's Vineyard retreat in Spanish for 5 years, and everything's set and ready to go, and these women just don't show up. There's so much shame, that is involved in the Latino culture. And I just need one woman to show up. Can you please share your testimony at a pro-life event in Spanish in a couple of weeks? And of course, my first thought was, no, right? Are you crazy? I had 3 abortions. I still felt shame. I was very terrified to do it. But she asked me to do it one time. And I remember that day I said, Valerie, it's the first and the last time that I share my story. And of course, God had a good laugh, right? I shared my story. I felt like I was gonna die. It was very, very difficult. And after that talk, 12 priests asked me to share my story at their parish and at their schools. And I did so. I couldn't say no to a priest. And that retreat in Spanish that was coming up, 9 women showed up at that retreat by the grace of God. And when I heard their stories, their stories were very painful. And I saw the healing that they received from God. I thought to myself, wow, if I didn't have the courage to share my story, these women would have never came to heal. So what started to happen is I started speaking at Latino communities, parishes, schools, and I became like a fisherman of post-abortive women. And so that's how I started doing this work, and then eventually moved on to internationally.
And when you are speaking around the globe, how are you received by the audience?
So I spoke for the first time internationally in 2007, and at the beginning it was very, very difficult. I'm going to say this humbly, but I believe I'm the first Latina to actually share a post-abortive story, and also as a worker behind the doors of Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry. So this was very shocking to the Latinos. So at the beginning, I'd get emails of people saying that I was going to go to hell. That God had mercy on a woman that had 1 abortion, but 3 abortions, that I was basically condemned. And at the beginning, it was very difficult. But I knew that I had to be faithful to God. I knew that I had to do reparation for what I've done. And I knew that there was at least 1 woman or man that was post-abortive that can actually heal from the story and find hope. And it has been so throughout the years. Yes, there's people that hate and condemn you, right, for telling your story and defending life. But then God touches hearts and gives hope to those who have been suffering from abortion.
He does. And Catherine, Patricia has a wonderful story of redemption and God's mercy, and we can see that it's changing hearts and minds. In recent years, you've covered many of the other facets of the pro-life movement, from legislation to pro-life doctors and pro-life families practicing what they preach. So tell us how you have seen hearts and minds change.
Well, and that really is the ultimate goal, isn't it, Debbie, with so much of the programming and work that we do, to bring people to the truth of God's mercy and the beautiful truth when it comes to the church's teaching on life. I just need to pause and reflect on Patricia's witness that she just shared, and just to applaud her vulnerability and courage in speaking out. And when you hear her story, you realize that encounter that she had at that retreat was huge, right? And also her willingness to share her story. I know in my role as a journalist, and when it comes to covering this issue, I can feel really isolated in the studio, and I don't necessarily see what happens when our viewers watch our segments, right? So it can feel kind of isolated, and I feel separated from seeing those conversions of heart and mind. But I've had the privilege in conducting interviews and in storytelling and doing different reports to hear these various conversion stories. And so many people who are really prominent in the pro-life movement today did convert to the pro-life issue. A lot of them converted to Catholicism as well. But for example, I think of Marjorie Dannenfelser of Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. She was once pro-choice, very adamantly so, came to have a change of heart. Abby Johnson, of course, of And Then There Were None, came to have a change of heart. And there's been so many others I've interviewed as well. And a reoccurring theme that comes up in these stories is that there was someone who was pro-life, who was willing to sit down and have hard conversations and answer the questions and get into the weeds of the debate and really encounter that human person in front of them. So that's really what it takes when it comes to conversion and changing hearts and minds. Is we have to be willing to sit down with someone we disagree with and have these tough conversations. But also, it's so important to remember that it's only because of God's grace that these changes of hearts and minds can happen, that there is only one Savior, and He is Jesus Christ. So we have to do the best that we can, but then put it in Jesus' hands and just cooperate with His grace and with His mercy.
Amen. And that's a theme that has been persistent throughout the entire time that Mother Angelica had founded EWTN, and all of these years later, over 43 years later, is that we have to pray that Jesus will put us in a position where the right people will hear the message. And now you've shared so many of the heartwarming and encouraging stories over the years, but there have also been some really upsetting ones. So what has been the impact of sharing not just the lighthearted, encouraging stories, but the really difficult ones as well?
Yeah, no, that has been an important part just in news reporting. I know that has been an important part in the history of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, speaking out at what St. John Paul II coined the culture of death. So, for example, there are celebrities who will claim that they were able to get their accomplishments because of a previous abortion. Not too far behind from now was the recent DNC convention where they had a bus that a Planned Parenthood bus, was performing free vasectomies and abortions, very proudly so, had a wait list to do so. And when you see these different instances, they are just black and white examples of right versus wrong, of evil versus good. And it is important to call it out because there is wrong, there is evil happening here. And we do need to call it out, to bring it to the light, and then again, to respond in truth and in mercy.
That's what we have to do. Sometimes it takes those shocking stories that make you realize that this is wrong. And if you're not infuriated, are you paying attention? And now, Kristen, what you're doing on campuses is so essential to the pro-life movement and abolishing abortion. So in the most literal sense, though, it's a battlefield for you. So there have been pro-lifers who've been physically assaulted. Their displays have been destroyed. And you've been, I've seen this on Instagram, surrounded by angry mobs of people who shout falsehoods, and they've got signs with horrible things on them and vulgarities, and they try to trap you with these trick questions. So what have you learned over the years from your visits to college campuses?
Yeah, I think, playing off and building off what Catherine said is important. Being unafraid to speak the truth when you're engaging in those conversations with those who deeply disagree with you, asking questions. I often find sometimes when I'm in those conversations where there's a bunch of students surrounding me, you know, someone comes up and starts screaming at me and accusing me of horrible things because they have this caricature of who they think I am. At the end of the day, they're probably not going to change their mind. My best view, I know, is that I'm going to be able to plant a seed of doubt that then hopefully someone else comes alongside, comes after, and really starts to water. And eventually that fruit harvests on that vine. And I think that's important, something I tell all of our students when we're training them and how to speak truth about abortion is, take a breath and understand that, getting someone to admit to another person's face, especially a stranger, that they're wrong on an issue is extremely difficult. Even think about it when you confront a friend or a family member about an attitude or a behavior. Getting them to admit to you, even if you confront them on that maybe they've been wrong or that they've wronged you, is very difficult. The human ego doesn't want to do that. So what I view it is I'm planting seeds, and I'm also thinking about the people who are listening to the conversation. So when I'm asking clarifying questions and having the person who is justifying abortion in all 9 months of pregnancy for whatever reason, having them make them say and state what their extreme belief on abortion is, because often most people do not actually believe that late term abortions exist. That's why there's been this whole deceptive misinformation campaign from Planned Parenthood trying to say that they don't exist. You hear that all the time. The media has these talking points. Anytime a Republican on CNN says late term abortions, the anchor cuts in and says that doesn't exist, which is not true at all. And so I think getting the other side to actually admit what it is they're doing, what they stand for, is important. And then also just breaking down your conversation when you're having it. Because what I have found tragically on campuses is that the real crux, the real issue at hand is that these young people do not believe their lives have value, that life has any meaning at all. And so convincing them why they should care about a child they can't see in the womb, who doesn't have the capacity to live outside of the womb by his or herself yet, is really hard to do when you ask them if their life has value and meaning and they say no. We have to get back to all the way to the basics for that.
And that's why the life issue is such a preeminent issue for our Catholic faith, because when you get to the root of it, you realize that we're talking about souls. We're talking about human beings, and we want them to know that they have the right to life and that they have dignity just because of who they are. So I really appreciate you, Kristen, talking about leaning into understanding that human dignity. And I have to ask, so when you're training students to go out onto campuses and to do this outreach, what kind of strategies are helping them changing minds?
Yeah, I think it's, asking clarifying questions. I often talk to our students about couching the conversation in the terms of justice and fairness. Talking about the violence of abortion is really important. That's something that even if students disagree with you, that children in the womb have value or the same value as adults. You can't deny that abortion is innately a violent act, that it ends the life of a human being that would have been living had his or her mother not paid someone to end their life. And so I think, we try to talk in terms of that this generation cares about. This generation cares about ending violence. They care about protecting human rights, and they care about justice and fairness. And so we talk about it in words that they're using, in conversations that they're having on campus. We approach the argument from a scientific manner. I often don't bring up my religion, my views on religion in conversations. They often do. And they'll want to bring the argument to religion because they think that when they can bring up religion, it will shut you down, and they'll say, well, you're just pro-life because you're a Christian. Well, yes, I am a Christian, and yes, I'm pro-life, and I believe as a Christian that all human lives have value and they were created in the image of the Creator. So yes, I'm not denying that, but I'm not even asking you to accept that principle. I'm just asking you to accept this one principle over here. And once they learn that that doesn't shut you down or shut you up, then you can often get to an actual conversation about abortion. But we approach it because I'll say, well, excuse me, why are you bringing religion into this conversation? I have been make it scientific. I've made a biologically sound case for the development of the human being. I've made a philosophically sound case of why human beings must have value at the moment of their conception and cannot, suddenly get value at any other point in their life. What's causing you to have that reaction where you don't actually want to debate or have a conversation based on science and philosophy? They tend to get pretty angry about that, but it does calm them down when they realize that they are going to be called to actually answer the question, and they can't just rely on the talking points that they've heard and that we've all heard since the 1970s that it's just a clump of cells and meaningless.
And Kristen, this is one of the many things I love about your videos and about what Students for Life does. You hit people with facts, and you do it so clearly, and you guide them into the truth. There was one video I was thinking of. A girl claimed that fetuses at 12 weeks don't feel pain. And you said, yes, they do. It's a scientific fact. And then you went on to tell her, I believe it was a study by the National Institute of Health. And she said, and I quote, if you can prove that if you can prove it's right, I will change my mind. And so immediately you were able to pull up on your phone the scientific study that was done in 2022, and she was speechless. And this is one of those ways we know as pro-lifers that the truth is on our side, and we have an obligation to be as informed as possible and be able to communicate it as clearly and charitably as possible. And Patricia, now, one of the things that you point out in your pro-life outreach that I appreciate so much is that there are more than 2 victims of abortion. It's not just the mother who loses her baby or who chooses to end her baby's life for whatever reason. And it's not just the baby that's dying, but there are other victims as well. Can you tell us about those?
Right. It's a whole ripple effect when a woman decides to have an abortion. But I always say that I was a victim of the abortion industry for the first time when I was in the 6th grade, when I was 12 years old, when Planned Parenthood came to my school and gave us a course on sexual education. Now, the abortion industry knows that a lot of these kids are not receiving any type of formation at home, so they become their sexual educators, right? And in school, an abortionist came to my school and basically, spoke about safe sex, which does not exist, and talked about abortion rights. You know, if you find yourself in an unwanted pregnancies, we have the solution. You can come to our clinic, we'll take care of the problem. It's your body, it's your choice, the whole clump of cell thing. You know, this is back in the 90s when the internet didn't exist, there was no YouTube, there was no social media, so it was just harder to see the truth back then. And they didn't speak about the dignity of human life, the beauty of maternity, of fatherhood, of motherhood. Basically told us that it wasn't a baby until you were 5 months gestation. And so pretty much at the age of 12, I was pro-choice. I was pro-abortion. And not only was I a victim, but when I became pregnant and wanted to have an abortion, I didn't really care about what my partner thought. He didn't want to have an abortion, and I went ahead and did it without his approval. And this is a message that the pro-abortion industry does to students. When they give that message, it's your body's your choice, ladies, it basically gives a message to the young men, you have no issue in this decision if she decides to have an abortion, right? It's not your issue, it's not your choice. And what I did at the age of 19 is I took away my partner's fatherhood. You know, I took his paternity away, his rights away. And he was greatly affected by the 3 abortions. He also suffered post-abortion syndrome. And my parents were affected by it. You know, they found out later on that they had 3 aborted grandchildren. I've seen many parents mourn over their aborted grandchildren. Siblings as well. When a sibling finds out that their mother had an abortion, they always knew and they felt that something was missing. But they go through a mourning, process, and it just affects a family. And affects a society when a woman decides to have an abortion. And also when a woman heals from an abortion, you know, I learned this years after, there's a lot of people to forgive. Not only did I have to forgive myself and ask God to forgive me, but I had to forgive the educators that failed me when I was in the 6th grade. I had to forgive the 3 abortionists that lied to me, the whole staff, you know, at the abortion clinics. And there was a lot of people that I had to forgive. So it's a ripple effect, a domino effect, and it affects a whole society and a nation.
Amen. And I appreciate you being so candid about the effect of your choice that you thought was a liberating choice. And we have to remember also when we're engaging with people about the pro-life issue and about abortion that we never know who has been impacted by abortion and in what way. So always, always, always speak the truth with love and with that understanding that so many are affected by it. And now, Catherine, your pro-life advocacy started in college, and look how far you've come. So what advice would you give to a fellow young woman who wants to be more outspoken about the life issue, but doesn't know where to begin or doesn't feel like she can make a difference on her own?
I think that is such an important question because there might be a viewer right now who is thinking, well, I want to do this, but I'm not as eloquent as Kristen Hawkins, or I don't have a powerful story like Patricia Sandoval. But I just want to remind people and remind you that God gave you a unique vantage point, a unique perspective, a unique voice that only you can bring into the world. And you are called to be the most you, right? That's what we're all striving for sainthood, which is when we are the most fully alive and most fully ourselves. So I just want to give that affirmation to viewers and to young women in particular who feel this prompting, that they want to get more involved, that they want to get more outspoken. And I just want to encourage you, it's good and okay to start small and to start local. You know, maybe that means sharing some pro-life video or pro-life fact on your social media pages. Maybe that means the next time you're in an Uber ride and maybe the conversation comes up and you have a conversation with your Uber driver. I have been in that situation and I've been surprised at where that conversation can go. Maybe it's even just at your own family dinner table for people who disagree with you. I mean, Thanksgiving's going to be around the corner, and that's always rife with discussion and disagreements. But maybe you can be this light and this voice for truth within your own family and home. So I just want to give an encouragement. Start small. Realize what your gifts are and that you are called to be the most you and to use that voice in the movement.
What beautiful advice. And Kristen, with the last couple minutes of the show, I really would love to hear your tips for young college women in particular. What kind of resources does Students for Life have available for these young women, not just to equip them, but also to give them the chance to safely engage on campuses?
Yeah, and I just want to start by echoing everything Catherine just said. I got started in the pro-life movement. I don't have a pro-life story, and I have a certain, personality that I'm sure turns off some viewers who see my videos on Instagram. But I'm honest to who I am, and I do what I feel the Holy Spirit has called us to. And so each of us has gifts. Some tuning in today probably are much more gifted than I am at apologetics on college campuses. I would actually say many of my own staff at Students for Life are better than I. I simply am the one who's unafraid to be yelled at. That's my special gift, where most people might fear that. And so I think it's, think about starting a Students for Life group or a campaign for abortion-free cities if you're an alumni, learning how to promote pregnancy resource centers, all of the resources that we have listed on Standing With You, standingwithyou.org, which is this massive national database and more than 5,000 resources. That's one of the things we ask every person to get started doing, of sidewalk chalking in front of the pregnancy center, standingwithyou.org, and the phone number that connects you immediately to Heartbeat International, or get started on your campus asking questions of, where does a girl who becomes pregnant, where does she go on this campus? Is she discriminated against? Does she have resources and support? And I can guarantee you will be shocked by some of the answers you will find on a local community college or college campus or even high school campus. It's a sad state. That's a very easy way for many folks to get involved, where it's not debating abortion, maybe while you're training yourself on binge watching all of my videos on YouTube, but you're getting active and you're doing the thing that's going to save the most lives, save the lives that are at stake, helping families and women in crisis right where you live. We do a lot of things at Students for Life that are even virtual. It could even start with sharing a graphic on your social media account, starting that conversation with that, liberal aunt, that's going to be a Thanksgiving with you, and starting that conversation now digitally before you see her in person, or getting involved in, National Pro-Life Gen Sidewalk Day, where we get trained by sidewalk advocates for life to go out and just start having conversations. There's so many different niches within the pro-life movement that no matter the giftings that God has given you, the personality that He's given you, you can take that and apply it, because we need all of us in this fight. This is a monumental task that we have in front of us. So it's not just somebody who is comfortable in politics or comfortable debating who's needed. We need everyone in this battle. And there's things that you all, and everyone who's listening, is much more gifted than I am, and that you've been called, spiritual gifts that you've been given from our Father, that you can invest into this movement.
Amen. And of course, all of us have an important role to play, especially praying for an end to abortion. Well, ladies, that is all the time we have for today. I wish I could stay and talk with you longer. If you'd like to stream more episodes of The Catholic Sphere, you can do so, and stream many, many more at ewtn.com/on-demand. Catherine, Kristen, and Patricia, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for joining as well. We'll see you here again next week on The Catholic Sphere.